This week on Dig Me Out. With your hosts, Jason Diaz and Tim Manish.
Jay, we're back again with another episode thanks to our Dig Me Out Union on Patreon. You can help us make the next episode happen by joining us at dmounion.com or digmeoutunion.com. And Jay, you know what this is. You know what time it is.
It's chippy time.
It's chip time. It's chip midnight time.
Hello, good evening.
It's chip 30.
Ooh,
It's
I
chip
like
o'clock.
that.
Do you know where your
30.
chips are? Going too far. There was really a commercial or public service announcement up until the 90s asking you if you remembered where your kids, that you have kids, or do you know where they are? Let's just think about that for a sec.
Things have
Do you know where
changed.
your children
It's 10 p.m. Do you know where your children are? I would think they would be in the bed of your home at 10
What about-
p.m.
What about that other commercial? Do you remember that one? The dad busts the kid with drugs,
Oh yeah.
and he says something. The dad's like, "Where did you learn how to do this?" Or like, and he's like, "I learned it from you, Dad."
Learned it from watching you.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. We wouldn't allow that shaming to happen now.
No.
There's no shame is not allowed. We are shame-free society.
Yes.
No.
Speaking of I don't know. There's no segue there.
I was trying to think of the segue too, and I could not think of one.
Who's your interview subject for this particular episode, Chip?
Oh, maybe the word law.
Oh,
That might be the.
that might have been the
segue.
transition.
Ah,
Okay,
yeah.
let's back it
So I
up.
talked to Dave Smalley, the lead singer of the band Down by Law. He also sang with ALL and Dag Nasty, and he's since the 90s had a number of bands in addition to Down by Law, who's released a number of albums. I mean, the artists that I have typically interviewed for Dig Me Out have been artists maybe who put out albums in the 90s and then realized that the dream was over and may have gotten jobs and come back to music at some point. But Dave Smalley has been releasing music since I think the mid 80s without ever really stopping, whether it's with Down by Law or a number of other projects. So it was kind of cool to kind of get that perspective of not somebody who ever went away and came back to it or was reminiscing, but somebody who's been active since the 80s.
And I remember all in terms of his back catalog. That was something we played at the radio station. We always bring this up, but at WFAL in Bowling Green, I remember seeing like I think Pummel was one of the albums that came out when we were there. I remember seeing that in the stacks, and it might have been in rotation even.
So he was not on. He was on album in the 80s. All Roy for Prez and All Roy Says.
Okay, so the first two after the guys from the Descendants,
Yeah.
Milo was doing his thing, going to school and what have you. So that's okay. So okay,
And I think Dave's been pretty vocal, and he even says it in the interview that at the time, in that time of his life, like All was out all the time, and that it just got to be a little bit too much for him. It was draining to always be on the road and to kind of never sleep in your own bed, and so his tenure in that band was relatively short just because it got to be a little bit too much.
he was not a road dog.
He wasn't, but then he ended up, starting Down by Law, and I think that they didn't quite do as many dates, but he also kind of reprioritized his values and kind of figure out how to make it all work.
Got it.
A big thing like I had mentioned to somebody that I'd interviewed Dave, and this person was like, I've seen Down by Law, but he's like, I think I didn't go to see them. I went to go see some other bands, and then he connected that it was at the Warped Tour, and Down by Law played the Warped Tour a few times, and so maybe a lot of the listeners had a chance to catch them on that.
Perhaps we discussed them when we did our Warped Tour episode,
I think that is entirely possible.
which you can find in our archives.
Yeah, I will say, Mom taught me never to have preconceived notions about people, or never judge a book by its cover. And when you're interviewing somebody who's been in punk rock bands since the 80s, I'll admit that I was a little bit nervous because I grew up in the suburbs and listened to 80s hair metal. And so what do I have in common with a punk rocker who, has lived that life of a punk rocker. Dave Smalley is one of the nicest people I've ever spoken to. Just seems to be just a very generous, happy, friendly guy. He has nothing, these guys who have been around forever and been in a couple different bands and have gone through band members, they may or may not publicly share stories about this guy I had to kick him out for this, or we broke up because of infighting. Dave just seems to, at least from our conversation, seems to just have gotten along with everybody, had nothing bad to say about anybody. He's just happy and excited that people even know who he is and have heard his music, and loves the fact his current project, Don't Sleep, are putting an album out in June, and he said that he met those guys. They were fans of his, and they sent him a message through, I think he said maybe Facebook or Instagram. They sent him a message and said, "Hey, would you like to sing on a song? We have this music. We'd love to have you help out or maybe produce it or guest on it." And he ended up liking it, and he was like, "Hey, we should start a band together." So he
That's cool.
Just a really great, friendly guy.
It's great when you meet people that have been in the business for a while, and things didn't come easy, but they just still love doing it.
Another thing, like Down by Law, I think, they had their moment. They headlined tours. They played on the Warped Tour, but they never were Green Day or Offspring or, they never reached that level. But, he's been able to make it work, and he's had a great time doing it, and he has no regrets. And, what I took away is that he's going to keep making music until the day that he can't.
Awesome.
That's not bad. That's a good life if you get to do what you want to do. And you're right. They're a band that I'm not super familiar with, but I think you mentioned before the podcast, I did actually review their last record for our box newsletter, which comes out every week, and enjoyed it very much. I'm trying to find the name of it. I don't remember the name of the record, but it was sometime last year.
Out in 2021, I think.
While you're looking for that, I know that I told him, and I had the Punk Rock Academy Fight Song CD that came out in '94, and I'm positive that I bought that because of the punk movement that was happening at the time, and we talked about that. Green Day spearheaded this revolution of bands and opened the doors for a lot of people, and I was caught up in all of that. I've been on the podcast before about different years and different scenes, how it went from 80s hair metal into grunge, and then the pop punk movement started. And so I was buying Green Day and Rancid and Offspring and Down by Law and Pennywise and like that whole, Bad Religion, all those sort of bands that kind of rose to the common collective in the mid 90s. So I definitely had a Down by Law CD during that time frame.
Yeah, I just found it was called Lonely Town. Came out in 2021, and I enjoyed it. I gave it a worthy album. I actually got to the point where it says the closer had a power pop vibe. So I mean, we were talking about hardcore versus punk versus pop punk and that kind of stuff, and there I was referencing 70s power pop. So.
Right.
Yeah, you'll hear Dave throughout the interview. Dave talks a lot about being part of the hardcore scene and hardcore bands, and he talks about Sick of It All and Agnostic Front and being friends and kind of running in the scene with those guys. But I think you're right. I think Down by Law, I think maybe my definition of hardcore is different than Dave's. And I mean, he lived that life, so I'm gonna default to what he says and what he thinks. But Down by Law was more, I don't want to say this, but palatable than some of the hardcore stuff that was just kind of a brutal listen. Like Down by Law is a very enjoyable listen.
You can tell him what hardcore really is. Don't be intimidated. You tell Dave Smalley what hardcore is.
Sit him down.
Yeah. Chip, thank you for another interview. And we know you've already got the next one ready to go. So, but we're not going to spoil it. We'll wait till we drop that one. We surprise you. These we don't preview these. There's no hint that these are coming. They just drop.
Boom.
Exactly. So let's go to that interview with Dave Smalley.
I've got nothing but time, so I'm still waiting. I'm still waiting. One time my eyes were wide, I couldn't
All right, welcome to another Dig Me Out podcast episode. I'm here with Dave Smalley from the band Down by Law and many other bands. So Dave, instead of telling me how you're doing today, tell me what were you doing today before this conversation started?
Hey, thanks, Chip. Super great to be here. Thank you very, very much for all of you having me on and for doing good things for music, truly. So today, I think so. I have I bought I got a puppy for my now 8-year-old daughter when she was 7. He's now 9 months old. He's a golden retriever, and his name is Snuggles. So that is because, my daughter named him at 7 years old, and so his name is Snuggles. So Snuggles was a very adorable, tiny, fluffy little puppy. Snuggles is now well on his way to 100 pounds. He is huge. And I've had dogs pretty much my whole life and love dogs and, but never one this size. And so I just took Snuggles out for a walk outside, and he's poorly behaved, and that's my fault because I'm not a good trainer. And my neighbor was walking by, Ben, and his dog, who's a black lab, who he has trained his black lab exquisitely. Like, this dog can does every, heel, turn, he does all the stuff, right, that Snuggles simply cannot or will not do. And again, I'm looking at myself, as the chief culprit here. It's not Snuggles' fault. So, but Snuggles goes ballistic in a good way, a loving way, when he sees anybody else, any other human, and just my daughter and me, he's fine with. But when he just lunges, jumps on their chest, his tail's wagging the whole time. No, not a bad bone in his body, but he is huge, and he literally has knocked people over. He's just going bananas, and I can't really see it now because I washed my hands when I got out, but my hands were just covered with, like, the leash was, like digging into my flesh, and I was like, come on, buddy, come on, no, and just, so I was exhibiting my failed ownership of Snuggles today. That was the highlight / low light. And I asked the vet last time he was in, for his shots or whatever. And I said, hey, when does this guy calm down? Because he's a whirling dervish, or whatever that expression is. And he said, oh, he'll be fine when he's about 2. And I'm like, so I have over a year left of mayhem. So that's a longer story than you probably wanted, but that's what I was doing, was trying not to get my hand ripped off while I was trying to calm Snuggles down and get him to behave like just a teeny bit. He did eventually calm down a little, but yeah. So
well, I was gonna say, listeners may want to fast forward a little bit, because I've got a couple dogs myself. We could probably talk about dogs for the next hour.
I'd be into it. Yeah, absolutely. What do you have?
So we have a mix golden German Shepherd. He looks like a golden.
Oh,
we
okay.
actually did the dog DNA test on it and determined that he is 50% both. So he had obviously a German Shepherd parent and a golden retriever parent.
Yeah.
Okay. He's 3. And then we got a puppy in October, November. And that guy is again, we did the dog DNA because we couldn't quite figure out. He is a white German Shepherd.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so,
interesting.
At some point in this interview, if somebody comes and knocks on the door, or if somebody walks by the house or something, we likely will be able to hear them because they are very vocal.
That's great. I love it.
Yes.
I love it. What are their names, your dogs?
So Charlie is the golden, and Fozzie is the German Shepherd.
After Fozzie Bear?
Yes.
After the Muppets? Okay.
Yep.
A great name. Great name. Both of them are good names.
So before we really get diving in, dig me out.
Yeah, your listeners and viewers are like clicking off right now.
Yes.
Like, oh my God, this is the most, these guys suck. Yeah.
Right. Dig Me Out. One of the things that Dig Me Out does is allows listeners to submit album requests that they want to have reviewed at some point. And coincidentally, on April, I can't remember the date, April 27th, I was just looking at all the submissions from I'm going to read this, David Tibble submitted a request to have Down by Law's Punk Rock Academy fight song to be reviewed on the show. So we always ask our listeners to kind of give a little reason why. And Dave said, this album is a desert island pick for me. I think it's a great punk album. I love Dave Smalley's voice. There's catchy tunes, emo punk ballads, humor, and a great cover of 500 Miles. So Dave, I don't know that the guys are going to review the album, but here we've got the singer from Down by Law. So trying to kill two birds with one
Thank you
stone.
very much, David Tibble. And that means a lot to me, truly. That was a really, I will say that, as now that I'm getting close to, retirement age or whatever, I'm going to say that recording Punk Rock Academy Fight Song was one of the more unique things I've ever done in music. It was just, there's been a few times when I was recording when you could feel the karma in the air. And I do believe in karma. I'm on my way. I wouldn't declare myself a Buddhist per se, because I think I don't know enough to call myself that, but I'm certainly in line with the tenets that I saw. As much as I understand them, I'm trying to get smarter, and they resonate with me, but I will say that there was karma or something in the air during that recording. And there was with Can I Say as well for Dag Nasty. And there was with I've been lucky in that I think every band I've been in has had at least one album with that karma in the air. But definitely when I hear Punk Rock Academy Fight Song, somebody mention it, and my mind is instantly, we're back at A&M Studios. We are goofy, we're ecstatic, because we're in a place where if you pinched me, I'm dreaming, I wouldn't have even dreamed that I would ever be recording in A&M recording studios when I was coming up. And the fact that the Rolling Stones were down the hall in the big studio recording the Steel Wheels album, the fact that I got to meet Keith Richards, this is stuff that you just never, literally pinch me, I'm dreaming, and then I'm still not going to believe it,
Yeah.
So, but the atmosphere, the fun, the silliness, and the absolute spontaneity of the whole album there was a magic there. There really was. And that was just such a lot of fun moments. I mean, so Sam, who's, been my friend and musical partner, Sam Williams, is one of the best guitar players in America, easily top 5 of I mean, I'm talking easy, probably number 1 in my book, but it's, given some leeway to Stefan and a few other great guitar players that I know, but certainly Sam Williams is top of the list, or top in the top 5. And he's my favorite, guitar player. And he would just do these drawings, that were just ridiculous. Like he drew the little Fuck It Boy. So we have this little thing. If you look on the disc or on the vinyl, there's a little punk rock guy with spiky collar, and he's like just giving the middle finger, and we named him the Fuck It Boy, and because he's saying fuck it, and just ridiculous. And then he did another one where he drew a picture with just a goofy guy, big smile on his face, and the guy's saying F you, Danny. Danny was our drummer on All Scratched Up. But like just these moments where Sam would do these insane things, and we had a list of album titles, proposed album titles, right? So we had this list, and just put on whatever title you're thinking of as we're doing this thing and recording and tracking, and so there was all kinds of things. And I won't even go into some of the titles that were suggested. They were not fit for polite society. Certainly there was one from one of our roadies that was, the talk of the town, but decided not to go with that one. And but I wrote down Punk Rock Academy Fight Song, and that's a combination of the Mission of Burma song Academy Fight Song, which is one of my all-time favorite songs and groups, actually. And Mission of Burma, of course, is from Boston, where I lived for 4 or 5 years and loved and still love. And so then I just put punk rock in the front of that, and I just merged it all together. And then I went on and didn't think anything of it. And then later that afternoon, Hunter, our drummer for Punk Rock Academy Fight Song, we were all just hanging out, and he was looking at the list, and I think we were listening to a playback or something. He said, "Oh, who named the album?" We all looked at him like, what? And he said, Punk Rock Academy fight song. That's it. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. That's it. And I'm like, I did, but that was kind of just a joke. And he's like, nope, that's it. So it was, and that's how that album title came to be.
So you mentioned it was a magical moment for you, that album. That was, I think, my introduction to the band. What do you think, what made it so magical for you? And I'm trying to think of the time period of 94, and that was probably when, like Time Magazine would have said like the year that the next wave of punk broke, right? It was sort of Green Day and Bad Religion and Rancid, and those bands were starting to kind of really become a little bit mainstream, I guess. Do you think that was it was a combination of that and kind of you'd been a couple albums in, it was kind of now your time to kind of step up?
That's a great question. I don't know, because I think if I knew what made those moments, I would package it and keep it or sell it, or you know what I mean? Like you'd be able to replicate it at will. But I don't really know. I think a lot of it is the time, like you say, the exact moment, and then a lot of it is the exact combination of people in a given room at a certain time, and even people that you may not interact with them again, but they, for whatever reason, but they at that time, there's a book by a guy named Eckhart Tolle. I'm not sure if you've ever heard of Eckhart Tolle, but he's a spiritual writer, very interesting guy, fascinating guy. And some of his works are bestselling. He wrote a book called The Power of Now, and then a subsequent book is called A New Earth. And I'm going to butcher it as a lay person describing it, but the part of the gist of The Power of Now and A New Earth is that we spend a lot of time looking back with either regret or wanting to stay in the past. So let's say you were a football star in high school, and like in Breaking Away, the movie Breaking Away, and that there's that one guy who was the football quarterback and he just wants to live in the past, right? And then, or there's people who just live in the past, like, damn it, why did I break up with that person? Why did I not take that job? Why did I take that job? Or why did I, get in an argument with my whatever teacher or my boss, whatever, or best friend, and now we're not best friends anymore. There's so many things that we do that we're living in the past, or we're living in the future. I don't want to do this today because that might endanger my future. Or I better not do something I really love because I might not then be able to do something in the future. Or I'm going to be rich in the future, but today I'm miserable because I'm not rich now. So we do a lot of things where our heads and our spirits and our minds and our hearts are not in the now, but rather they're in the past or the future, with fear or regret on both of those sides. So I think when I look back at those moments, I say those were magic moments. I don't know how, why, what created them, but I was just cognizant enough, just smart enough. Nah, I don't want to say smart because I'm not. I was just aware enough to sense it. It was, the proverbial lightning in a bottle or whatever, and so I think I felt it. We all felt it when we were recording Punk Rock Academy fights. And I would say that Don't Sleep has had those moments as well as the Bandoleros, as well as, all, and DYS. I've been lucky to have that feeling in various, permutations, different times.
Yeah. You had obviously come from some pretty well-known bands. It wasn't like this was your first rodeo.
Yeah.
Did it feel like, did it feel like, for Punk Rock Academy fight song, did it feel like you had finally arrived, or had you already had that feeling a couple times kind of up until that point through other projects you had done?
Yes, that's a really interesting one too. I would say we didn't know that we had arrived, but certainly and there'd been some really nice reactions to the first Down by Law, and there'd been some really nice reactions to Blue, which was our second record. And then and you talk about 90s bands, and we were very much that, the punk explosion, like you said, and all of that. So I always thought that one of the things I loved a lot about Down by Law was, even then, we were more musicians than maybe some of our peers, and that probably hurt us in some ways because we were less focused on anything besides the music. So you have a song like Our Own Way or the cover of 500 Miles, or whatever song you want. And those are songs that most groups at that time, there were punk groups, wouldn't have done. And that's not making us better or worse. It's just saying we stood in our own little world, and I think that we kind of felt like something was changing when we realized the reaction to Punk Rock Academy fight song. Like, oh, wait, you want us to go on Warped Tour? Oh, you want us to headline this place we've always been an opener for? You know what I mean? It was kind of like one of those things. Like, and then that was a really fun, time. And I remember we were on the Warped Tour in Europe. We were doing the Warped Tour in Europe, and we were playing at the in Leeds, I think it was, and at one of the big festivals, and huge tent, like probably 5,000 people, and then more, outside, and I still remember Fletcher from Pennywise. And we were going on and people were already like, down by law, and stuff. And I'm like, what the hell is this? And Fletcher looked at me, and he's a big guy, and Pennywise has always been pretty huge, so they're a very, very big popular band, and super great guys, and a really talented band. So, but anyway, Fletcher was looking at it, and he gives me this wicked smile, keep in mind, he's like 6'4" or something, and strong and big. Yeah. He looks at me and he's like, this is your time, brother. Don't fuck it up. I was like, thanks, Fletcher. Really appreciate that.
Yeah.
So then he kind of like basically just shoved me out on stage, and we had a good show. So it was great. But I'll never forget that moment.
So I feel like a lot of the bands that I've talked to for Dig Me Out, they've gone through certain periods. I've talked to some guys who came out of the late 80s and into the early 90s that might have been involved in like the LA Sunset Strip scene. And by the mid 90s, their careers weren't done, but their careers were put on hold for a long time. And then I've talked to some other bands who kind of emerged kind of mid 90s in the signing frenzy of everything that was considered alternative. And again, major labels going through layoffs and changes, and they put out one or two records and found themselves labelless. Yeah. You put out, if I'm counting correctly, 6 albums in the 90s, and not only Down by Law albums in the 90s. I mean, Down by Law is not just a 90s band. I mean, you had albums up until a couple of years ago. I mean, and it's still an active band.
As a matter of fact, yeah, we're still recording right now. Yeah. Sam has been sending me some songs, and I'm writing lyrics and melodies for him right now. Yeah.
So what do you attribute that longevity to when all these other bands that I seem to talk to had like a short burst in the sun and
yeah, like you can look at, for instance, most of the great Discord bands, right, in the 80s and 90s, and most of them, any one of them could probably reform right now and be extremely popular, and they just didn't, for whatever reason. Bands implode. Sometimes it's interpersonal, sometimes somebody gets married, or a job, or grown up life takes them a different way, and they don't think they can do both, and there's no rhyme or reason for how a band might stop. But I guess you do it as long as you feel it's the right thing, and as long as you're having fun. And I mean, I think for me, I was kind of like, I think somebody called me once the Johnny Appleseed of punk, because I would like kind of go and I started, I did DYS, and then, well, DYS didn't last. We lasted for 3 or 4 years, and then we broke up, and that was weird, because that was in '85, and we went to Charlie's, which was a diner in Kenmore Square in Boston. And I remember we were just all, and we'd kind of been moving more toward rock. We'd all learned to play our instruments or sing a little bit better, and like we were playing Dio covers and Van Halen covers at the Paradise in Boston and other places. So we were moving that way, as well were all the other Boston hardcore bands were kind of morphing toward. We all grew up worshiping, Iron Maiden or Judas Priest or AC/DC or whatever, Venom, and so, I remember we were at Charlie's and just eating, and we all just kind of looked at each other and said, yeah, this is it, like, yeah, let's just call it, it was like, it wasn't, and we just kept on eating. We had the rest of our meal, and it was so peaceful and mellow, and I still love those guys. always have, Jonathan Anastas, who went on to being the first bass player for Slapshot, as well as obviously all the permutations of DYS, subsequently, occasional reunions that we've done. He has remained, one of my inner circle of friends. He's a fantastic guy. And so there was never a drop of acrimony, badness, madness, maybe a little sadness, but it was just time, it was time. But I've been in other bands where I was exhausted and just couldn't keep going.
Yeah.
I was exhausted from the road. I think when I was in ALL, I was on the road for better part of a year, and it was tough touring life. I'm not crying. It was a great, golden, fantastic, lucky opportunity. I wouldn't trade it for anything. You could give me $1 million a check right now. Would you take back that year? Nope. Take your money. I don't want it. Take it back. But nonetheless, by the end, I was exhausted, like physically exhausted. I'd never been on the road for that long before, and I was burnt, but again, not a drop of badness, it but that was a different circumstance, from another reason. And Dag Nasty, I got a chance to go to grad school, and so I took that, and just whatever, we always have reasons for life. Think of all the things you've done in life where you've made a change, and not always the same reason.
Yeah.
So
what did you bring from those experiences into Down by Law so that you didn't get burned out? Was it like, did you cut back on how much touring you did, or were there other things that you had learned from the past so that you didn't get burned out?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think part of it was Sam, to be honest. Sam and I have been lifelong, best friends, and I just have such admiration for his songwriting and for his guitar playing that, he sends me these songs right now that we're in different cities and everything, but even when we were in the same city in LA, but he'll send me these songs, and for me, and I've said this before, it's like Christmas, because I'm like, oh my gosh, and I'm like literally gleefully rubbing my hands with excitement because I'm going to hear the magic that Sam Williams did, and it's so exciting. And then he laughs and says it's the same for him in reverse, because when I do the scratch vocal and I send it back to him, or when I just go to track and he hasn't even heard what I've done yet, for him, that's his Christmas, and it's just, so I think Sam Williams was a huge part of why, why we stayed. And then I think there's a real, like I said, sense of musicianship about Down by Law that I think, again, for better or for worse, it helps Down by Law stand out or stand apart sometimes. We are not a typical hardcore band. We have some songs that could fit right in with, any band you like, but that's in the genre right now, and I love that. I grew up on it, it's part of my DNA. I am a hardcore punk rock guy, but I also grew up singing in church choirs. I also took piano lessons, and I took trumpet and whatever. I was always a musician as much as I was, a hardcore guy. So I was really lucky because those two married up pretty nicely. So I was able to do what I did in Dag Nasty or ALL or whatever, or Down by Law, because of who I was, because of my background and all that. And then Sam was this kid who grew up playing. He would actually skip school sometimes and just sit there and play Van Halen records all day and play along to them on guitar. And when I say play along to them, he can play along to Eddie Van Halen. Like, who does that, right? Like, who does that? Nobody, but Sam can do it. And so that kind of thing. And we started out from real honest roots. It's just me and the Chemical People, some friends of mine, who were great band in their own right. And then we sort of just formed that out of friendship, pure friendship. I just said, hey, I've got a few songs. Do you guys mind playing them so I could hear what they sound like? And they were like, yeah, sure. So we got together and sounded amazing because they were all great musicians and great guys. And then that sort of became more than we imagined it would, because I really, like I said, it was, the original thing was, hey, let's just do this. And I say, all right, let's go do a couple fun shows, and then so we played, the Anti-Club, I think, was our first show. Or was that the first show? I can't remember. I think it was the Anti-Club. Anyway, so we did that, and there were a few others, Coconut Teaser was an early one, but Anti-Club was, I believe, our first show. And but anyway, so it just had real honest beginnings, and I liked that too. It wasn't like we set out to do anything. It was just like, hey, and then, we'd sit there and order pizza and Coke and, after practice. It was just very organic. And then that kind of dissolved in its own way after Blue and the second record. And that was okay because it was just like it had already done more than anybody thought they were doing. We had gone on tour to Europe, just even with that lineup. And everybody was kind of like, wait, what is happening here? This is turning into something, Pinocchio was becoming a real boy, and so we just sort of, but again, naturally, no acrimony dissolved. And then, Sam had written me a letter. So I wish to goodness that I had saved it. He sent this letter. He was in a band that had played with us, called Balance, and they played with us in Florida. And he sent this letter that was just the most sincere letter I'd ever gotten. Said, hey, you probably don't remember me, but my band played with you at at Janus Landing or Club Detroit or wherever it was, one of those two. And then he said, I'm just a huge fan. Would love to audition for you guys if you ever have any opportunities. Well, that came ironically right as all the changes were happening. And so it was, again, power of now, right? Like it was just like, be in the moment. Don't be in the future too much. Don't be in the past too much. Love your life and have expectations and joy, but also be in the now. And I was like, that's kind of funny, and like, I was like, sure, you want to come out? And it was just instant, I knew that he was the guy.
Did you ever feel, and specifically about the 90s, but at any point, any sort of pressure to get music out? Like, were you ever under any sort of deadlines and like, you got to get it out this year, like getting caught in that cycle of writing, recording, touring, or did you sort of just record when you felt like the time was right?
I would say there was, so, we came up on Epitaph Records, which was formed by a punk rock guy, Brett Gurwitz. And so we never experienced any of that kind of major label pressure. No. I would say that if you want to survive as a band, it behooves you to sort of, keep recording. And the other thing is, if you're a musician and if you're a songwriter, you kind of want to, like I feel like stagnation is creative death, so I really wanted to always be, cognizant of being true to your muse, your inner muse, and not sort of allowing success or failure or lethargy or anything else to dim those fires. I think those fires need to burn bright. So yeah, I think for me, it was not ever an issue, partly because I always, as long as, there's breath in my body and the karma is there to create honest, powerful, good music, I will try and answer that call.
Yeah. Was Down by Law at the point in the 90s paying the bills, or were you working other jobs like when you weren't on the road?
I would say overall, there was a brief period where we were, first of all, we were on the road a lot, and it was almost impossible to have a gig at home, so it was, but it was, certainly we weren't buying cars, even used cars, we were paying our rent and our food, maybe for a little while, but we were never, at the stage where, we were, making beaucoup bucks, it wasn't even put towards that. And then, even when we were doing our best, the expenses side of music is very high, to get either a van that's good, where you're going to be in it for 3-4 months at a stretch, and you want to at least have a van that works and is comfortable. I'm not saying it has to be the best van on the roads, or if for a few tours we did tour buses, and those bloody things are expensive, I'll tell you. So that'll suck you faster than you can blink. $500 to $1,000 a day, just for the vehicle. I don't even think that includes the driver, like stuff like that. So, and I don't know what they are now, because I haven't been in one in forever, but it was expensive. So your expenses are high, even if you're making more, In
those tour bus days, was there ever a point where you thought you were kind of living beyond your means as a band? Like, did it ever go to your head? Was there anything
Oh.
anything that kind of like gave you a heightened sense of like, man, we're selling out these clubs, we got a bus, like we are the biggest band in the world? Or were you always pretty humble about kind of where you fit in the music landscape?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I would say we never, no, I don't think we ever took it for granted, and I don't think we ever, and part of that's punk rock, right? Part of that's
Yeah.
hardcore, is that it's organic, and I remember just always wanting to be with the audience. I never liked barriers before the stage. I never liked I mean, hopefully people who know me and who've worked with me or met with, or people who met me at shows or whatever will attest to the fact that I genuinely like people. I genuinely like I love hardcore and punk rock, and I love independent, podcasts, music, zines, labels. That's all stuff that's extremely real to me. So I never took it like that. Sometimes I would smile though, right, and be amazed. So I remember one time we were in Holland, and Amsterdam. Epitaph had an office in Amsterdam, and so the gentleman who ran Epitaph Europe, we had a show the next day, and it had gotten canceled. And so we're like, oh man. And I think we had a day off again the day after that. So we were like, damn, we've got 3 nights, with no income, nothing to do. Of course you're in Amsterdam, so you can't cry, right? You're like in one of the most beautiful cities in the world, so because Amsterdam is awesome. But and I had so many good friends there that I met, great audiences, great people. So, but anyway, so the owner or the guy who was running Epitaph Europe said, well, do you need a hotel, for a few nights? And I was like, yeah, man, thank you so much, please, and he said, let me take care of it for you. Okay, awesome. So he talks to somebody, and they make some arrangements and says, okay, here's go to this address. You're all set for the next 3 nights or whatever. And I go, okay, thank you so much. You're a god among men, and so great dude, and was so kind to us. And he was a very dignified guy in his, probably at that time in his 40s. So to us, of course, you think that's old at that time, when you're in your 20s or whatever. And so, but anyways, he said, here you go. So off we go. We pull up to this gorgeous hotel that was an old, like apparently some old beautiful, maybe a chateau or something. It was part of the city, but it was like truly a gorgeous building just from the outside. So we go in. Place is I don't even want to know, 5-star, whatever the highest level is, far beyond us. Like we did not deserve or merit, that place. But we all got our own room, which was again kind of special for us because a lot of times you're sharing rooms with somebody. And so we go in, and still remember going to one of our roadies' rooms, and he got it. They gave everybody got their own room, the crew, everybody. It was insane. And so we go in, and he's got, our roadie's got the robe. The hotel had robes in your room. So he's got this robe on, and he's smoking a pipe. And for all the world, he looked like some aristocrat from from the 1930s or 20s, whatever, 10s. Like an old world. Like it was the funniest thing. And he had a roaring fire going in his room. So he just looked like landed gentry, and it was the funniest thing in the world because this guy was decidedly not that. And It was great. It was great. I loved it. So those were times when I would smile and I'd kind of look up at the sky and universe, thank you. These are great moments. These are fun. Yeah.
I mean, even that story, what you said, I've never been out of the US, and part of that is just, I don't know. I don't want to say laziness, maybe lack of risk of adventure, but the fact
not at all.
The fact that you've been able to tour around the world is something you must look back on now and be like, I got to see a lot of cool places in my life.
I do. I'm very, very blessed and fortunate. It was, and it's funny, I see people who have gone, and still go out a lot, and do things. And there's all kinds of different ways you can do it as a tourist. For instance, a lot of people in Australia, they take off for like 6 months a year and they just go places. Like they'll work their butts off for 6 months and save money, and then they freaking go for 6 months to another part of the world, or 3 months or 4 months. It's incredible. I don't know if you've ever met any Australians who've done that, but it's fairly common apparently. And God bless them. That's amazing, so they do it. There's many people do things like that, take extended trips or whatever. I know one guy got married in where did he get married? In Spain, all kinds of stuff. So they kind of, there's different ways to get overseas, but for my way, it was very unique. And I wouldn't trade a single day of it, but again, not everybody follows the same path. So I would not say you are lazy, or I would not say that. I would say everybody has a different path. So there is no right or wrong. And what you've done in your life is obviously great. Look what you're doing right now for your pleasure. You get to do this thing for music. Like, that's amazing. That's great, And so, so I wouldn't call it that. I would just say everybody has a different path. Yeah.
Did you experience any, like, I don't know, where in the 90s, what you consider to be home base? Was it Boston?
No, in the 90s was LA.
Okay.
LA. So yeah, we started in LA. The first I think we started in '89 for Down by Law. So yeah.
Were you ever, I don't want to say a local band, but were you playing regularly in LA, or was it always play an occasional show in LA, but really kind of get out of town?
No, we were definitely an LA band. Epitaph, most of the bands, not all of them, but most of them were, Rancid obviously had roots in Northern California. But I would say most of the bands, Pennywise was, South Bay, All wasn't on, but that All was Alameda, Southern California. And then, Bad Religion, Southern California. You could go down the list pretty much of most of the early. No Effects was Northern California. They were from San Francisco. But in large part, most of the bands were Southern California bands. So.
But like you weren't playing like every Tuesday night somewhere in LA.
No.
Yeah.
No. We would just play occasional shows, but but I would say if you asked us where you're from, everybody would have said we're an LA band.
Yeah. The reason I sort of asked that is, like I said, I'm from Columbus, Ohio, and the New Bomb Turks are from Columbus.
Oh, New Bomb Turks are awesome. Yeah.
And they always, when I was in college, I mean, they always did well in Columbus, and they played here probably more often than not, but they weren't the Tuesday night at a club band. I mean, it was a special show, but I was always super intrigued, and especially before the internet, hearing their stories about going to Europe and just the crowds they had there. And I was sort of wondering if you found that crowds outside of your hometown were bigger, better, and knew you better than the people in your hometown.
Yeah. That's a great question. I feel like we've had a lot of LA fans. Part of the thing about LA, of course, is it's huge and there's a lot of bands. And particularly in the 90s, there were shows almost every night or every weekend, everywhere, so I would say we probably, certainly there were places that we would play. Tampa was always huge and good for Down by Law, for instance. And I would say, there were certain places, New York, New Jersey, has always been like kind of a lot of my people are in New York and New Jersey, and great hardcore music there and great fans. And, everybody from, American Standard to Sick of It All to, the list of bands is forever, right? From New York, Agnostic Front, pick your band of greatness. And, there's a good chance they have New York or New Jersey tie-ins a lot of times. So, but I think we had certain places where we did better, but I would say we were liked in LA and we had fan base there, but maybe it wasn't our biggest, And again, it also fluctuates, right? So life goes in cycles. To quote a Dag Nasty line, life goes in cycles of highs and lows. That's something only time can show, right? So that I would say is true of bands, like you mentioned, bands that, were huge and then they, weren't. And that's part of the music cycle too, and part of life's cycles. One of the things about, as you achieve sort of more awareness of, you know, being at one with the universe a little bit, you kind of realize that those cycles are okay. And that's, you know, again, where you are right now. Let's say you're in a down phase of whatever, life or job or band or whatever it is, girlfriend, boyfriend, you know, and you're in a down phase or it's ending. And that's as it should be, even though it's hard at the time. And that all that means is that there are doors opening that you don't even know, but they wouldn't have opened if you'd been staying in that same trajectory where you were before. So sometimes, you know, and that's particularly true if you're in a relationship that's struggling or hard, and then the breakup finally occurs, and it's hard and it's painful and it sucks, but then you're like, you remember the pain of while it was disintegrating, right? And the hurt and sometimes anger and those kinds of feelings that you had, loneliness, even though you're with, you know, your partner, and you remember that, and then the break finally comes and it really hurts, and you know, you listen to Hank Williams Senior records, and you know, and the world, you know, is under a black cloud like Eeyore, you know, and Winnie the Pooh, right? But then those doors open, and in a romance sense, you, before you know it, you meet somebody else, and you know, or in a band sense, before you know it, you're on to the next thing. And, you know, before you know, so those moments of highs and lows are hard at the time, really hard. But they also do tend to be, strangely enough, often something that works better than you could possibly have imagined.
So you mentioned highs and lows, and it got me to thinking a little bit that hardcore and punk and like hard rock, like the stuff you were mentioning, the Iron Maidens, the Judas Priest, like that music seems to be pretty timeless. And there's bands now, there's like hard rock bands. I think it's when there's, and I don't even want to say gimmick, but whatever like the now music is, maybe is not long standing, right? Maybe in a couple of years something new, but like it seems like, I guess country, you can throw country music into that too, but there's certain genres of music that you know, there's always going to be hardcore punk rock music and hardcore punk rock fans, whereas again, the flavor of the month, the ska movement that happened for a little while in the 90s kind of disappeared pretty quickly. That makes me wonder though, the other thing I remember about the 90s is that was, I think it was the 90s, right? The emergence of Napster. Was that in the 90s or was that in the early 2000s?
I don't think so. I think you're right. It was 90s. I think you're right. Yeah.
Did you find that Napster and that kind of stuff affected your band at all?
You know, I don't know. It may have. To me, you know, punk rock was never about, you know, moving units, as the industry, you know, like parlance puts it, you know, selling records, they call it moving units, you know, which even that terminology to me is, you know, that's not how I think or think about, certainly not how I think about making music at all, whether you're jazz, you know, reggae, punk rock, I don't care, whatever you do in life, if you're a musician, you never want to think of it as moving units, you know. I'm sure there are, you know, big, huge artists who view it as such. It's their career, their job, and they think of it as a business. And that's what their thing is. That's cool for them, but it's never how I viewed it. So to answer your question about Napster, if it did impact us, which it probably did, I would say it didn't impact my love for the music, and it didn't impact my commitment to the music and how I viewed what this whole hardcore punk, beautiful family, community, independent, you know, sharing, caring, swearing, you know, world was and is. And so I never kind of got wrapped up in the debate, to be honest with you. You know, I do remember, you know, I think it was Metallica sued them, if I'm not mistaken. And I remember getting in trouble with somebody because people were saying, oh, you know, they shouldn't have done that, right? And I was just purely objective, right? And I knew that, you know, it's not going to affect me one way or the other, pretty much, because yes, it might, for us, 1,000 downloads or whatever, you know, hurts us way more than it hurts Metallica, right? Metallica can sneeze 1,000 downloads, you know, each band member, you know, so you know, for us, you know, if you sell, you know, 50,000 records, then 1,000 is, that's a good chunk of change, or, of your stuff. Right. So, but I remember saying, on the other hand, I kind of understood why they did it. And they argued at the time. And of course, the fashionable thing was to do, oh, they're just doing it because they want more money. I was like, they already are huge. They are already, huge. Metallica got huge very quickly. And they're also one of my favorite bands. I think Kill 'Em All and Ride the Lightning are two of the best hard rock metal records ever made, So, but I remember thinking to myself and having this argument that they were actually saying you shouldn't have the right to just take an artist's product for free. Right. So let's say you, Chip, are a painter. All right. And you make a painting. All right. And you worked really hard on that painting. You spent money on the canvas and the paints. You spent days, weeks, months getting it right, anguish, tearing up the first version, everything. You spent a lot of heart and soul. You poured your heart and soul into your painting. And then I come into your house and I just take it. I'm taking your painting. Like, wait a minute, I just poured my heart and soul into that thing. You don't,
Right.
You don't have the right to just take that painting. I don't even know if I want to sell it. And first of all, and if I do, at least, give me the gesture that you respect that I poured time, effort, and creativity into that. So there's two sides to so many stories, right? And I remember having that, and the one argument is music should be free and open for the world, and I love that. I do, but it is an incredibly challenging proposition. It's hard to do. It takes, anguish and heart and time and love and, yes, money to do what everybody loves to do. So I think I understood both sides to that argument, really.
Yeah. From a money perspective, and especially hitting the iron while it's hot in the 90s, everything that we've talked about so far, I kind of feel like I know how you're going to answer this, but I want to ask you the question. Epitaph seemed to be a pretty big, legitimate, and they are. There's no doubt about that. Were you ever approached by a bigger label, and did you ever have a chance at a Warner Brothers contract or a Sony contract?
So there's been 2 times that I can think of off the top of my head in my career where that was a thing. One was after our second DYS record came out, the metal one. We got flown down to New York to go to Elektra Records and met there. And the discussion that was had was, hey, you guys, if you guys keep doing this metal thing that you're doing, this rock metal thing, we love that, and if you want to go more in that direction, it wasn't like a you must, or it was more like, if that's the direction you guys are going, we're interested. And at that time, I just said it was where my heart was. It really was. But I couldn't commit to being fully non-punk, right? Like, it's just in my blood. I've grown up in the punk and hardcore world, and I love it. It's a joyful world. It's beautiful. It's creative. It's frustrating. It's fascinating. It's everything, but it is part of who I am. Yeah. And so I we kind of just said no. And then we had that famous, thing that I talked about where we just kind of went to dinner and broke up, so it wasn't that long after that. We're like, we could either get signed to a major label or break up. Let's break up, so that was kind of one. And then the other was, there was some interest from a couple of labels actually in the 90s for us, for Down by Law. And it just it just, again, like I said, that, that moment, the now, the bottled lightning, like that just never felt right. And we were really happy with Epitaph, and we never pushed anything, we just didn't, nope, we're good. We're here. Thank you. Appreciate it. But
Yeah. So as I mentioned earlier, you put out 6 albums with Down by Law in the 90s. Let's not even fast forward. Let's go into 2000 to 2023. You've put out a ton of music. Like, you've got a bunch of different bands. You've got a bunch of different stuff. Not to make light of it or synopsize it, but give me a brief run through. So 1999 comes to an end. We enter the 2000s. Just talk about some of the different stuff you've been working on the last 20 plus years.
Man, you're trusting my memory here. You know, so I don't know if I would be able to break it up chronologically the way you're asking. I can just tell you right now I am, still doing Down by Law. And like I say, we're actually recording right now. And I think Down by Law's last couple records, one is called All In, and great cover of All In. It's got a very Clint Eastwood cowboy looking silhouette, and it's really cool. I love the artwork, and the album's pretty damn good. And then there's another one called Lonely Town, which came out a few years ago, and that was our most recent album. And it too, objectively, is a really strong album. Like, it's some of Sam's best songwriting, some of my favorite lyric writing, and singing, and just there was a lot of fun creatively in that album. So that's Down by Law. And then I've done a band with some really dear brothers and friends in Spain. That band is called Dave Smalley and the Bandoleros. And I will tell you that I've never been in a more joyful band than the Bandoleros. These guys are, first of all, they're phenomenal musicians. I won't play without great musicians around me. And that's not because I'm great. It's because I want to feel that we are offering something so unique and so special, and that we can create something so unique and so special. I'm not in it just to just do it only for fun. It has to be fun, but I want it to be great too, if it can be, and it doesn't always work. Not every interview you do is going to be great. I hope this is one, but maybe it's not. So thanks. So, I think so the Bandoleros are great musicians, and they are also joyful. Like, we smile so much in that band. Like, we'll be playing, and I'll look over at Pablo or Marcelo or Javi, or Rafa, and we will just smile at each other. They are great brothers. They are true brothers. And the music reflects that. When you listen to Join the Outsiders, which is our first album, I think that's our only full-length album. We've done a lot of other singles and EPs and things, but when you listen to Join the Outsiders by the Bandoleros, it is a joyful album. They killed it. I'm taking myself out of the equation. Those guys killed it. And then Don't Sleep is, this is really a cool, exciting band right now for me, because obviously I came up, in hardcore roots. There's a line on one of the Don't Sleep songs. It says, "I came of age in a pit. My life is proof of it." And it's true, And so, from 81 to 2023, I've never not been in love with hardcore, and I've never not respected what it has done for so many thousands of people, me included. You included. It's shaped us, it's changed us, it's hardened us, it's softened us, it's made us caring, certainly for our brothers and sisters that we're interacting with in our own small scene. Because, think about hardcore. All right. So you take punk rock, capital P, right? And it's this relatively big field, everybody from, Devo to, Devo and the Pistols and the Clash, and to, whoever, nowadays is considered a punk rock band. So fairly big, and then you take hardcore. Well, hardcore is like just one slice of that pie, right? Of that punk rock pie. It's just a slice. Mm-hmm. It's really a small slice. There's some huge bands, Pennywise, Sick of It All, whatever, there are some huge bands that are great. And I am huge fans of those bands, but overall, it's a pretty small slice. Well, here's Don't Sleep, which comes about with 4 guys who sent me their demo. They were in a band called Very Americans, and they it's kind of a tongue-in-cheek album title or band name, and they sent me this thing over the on Facebook Messenger, I think, or through an email or something, and digital anyway. And I listened to their album, and I was like, oh my gosh, this thing is phenomenal. Like, these guys are great. And that was not a hardcore band, but they all came from the same roots, and excuse me. And so they they just were like, yeah, we love what you do, and we'd love to play with you anytime. So I went up and did a solo show up there, and they opened up, and we all, karma again, it was like a spark. It was in the air. We played, and then they played a couple encore songs with me. They did a couple of Dag Nasty songs with me as the encore, and they were great, and it felt great. And then we did it again. Then eventually they started playing with me as a band live, but it was still me solo. And then eventually we're like, okay, this is this is either a thing or it's not. What do you want to do? Let's make it a thing. So we called it Don't Sleep, and and we have this shared love of and respect for hardcore that I truly value and cherish. So yeah.
And that's cool. Again, I'm going to guess your answer, but I'll let you actually answer it.
Sure.
So are you still, I mean, you're still finding joy in finding new bands that you like, or do you tend to fall back on the stuff that you're familiar with and like the older stuff, or are you constant kind of at least listening to kind of what the current state of hardcore is?
Great question. I think a little bit of both. I'd be lying if I said that I don't like to put on let me put it a positive way. I do still love to put on, My War or Rise Above or whatever Black Flag album or song you want, Jealous Again EP, whatever, that stuff is still, incredible. I put on early GBH album recently, there's still a lot of stuff that I absolutely love. And I also love a lot of parallel bands to all that, like XTC and sort of the Jam and bands that weren't hardcore at all, but that came up in that same era or earlier, maybe some of them, and yet they still were part of my formulation, and so I still love that stuff too. I don't have as much opportunity to know about the newer stuff, I'm super busy and I'm not, sort of in good opportunities a lot of times to learn about good new bands. I do get a lot of bands send me their stuff, and I love that. And I'll listen to it every time. So anybody that sends me something, I will listen to it. I will enjoy it. I will give you thoughts on what I love about it. I'm never going to tear you down if you send me something. It's just not my style. I'm going to tell you, I'm not going to lie. I'll tell you what I like about it. And there's always something to like about it if you work hard at it. Don't ever put a band down. Try and realize that these are human beings, that they're doing what they believe in, that they love, they're good people, and find the joy of what they're doing. I'd say that for whatever you do in life, for your job. If your job's hard and it's frustrating, got it, been there. But like, find the joy in it. What's the joy? Maybe the guy in the cube next to you is super funny. All right. So that, enjoy that, hang out with that guy, or maybe, think about what you do in your job and realize that you're helping people, and so whatever you do with accountants, it doesn't matter. You're an accountant. That's awesome. What a great skill and what a great thing you're doing. You're helping people, you're, especially if you're helping individuals at tax time or whatever. And like, oh my gosh, that's like the most honorable thing practically there is, and you're helping people. That's a great job. So there's always, something to find in life that, you can find joy in. And I would say that I try and find joy in whatever music I hear. I will say that my 19-year-old son is a musician, and a pretty damn good one. I think he's definitely going to eclipse, or let's just say he has eclipsed his old man already. And he was just with me for a couple of weeks, and he told me about this band called Fontaines DC. Ever heard of them?
I saw them.
I think they're Irish.
Last year. Yeah.
Oh, how was it?
Oh, they were great. I went into it not knowing a ton. I had a friend who was like, we had to go see them. And I'm 51. So I was 51 last year when I saw them. And my friend and I worked our way up to the front, like amongst all these 25-year-old kids. And
sure, yeah.
I was sore the next day, but I had a great time. They were great. Yeah,
I think they're really unique and good, and and they are, part of the future, right? And that's a great thing. And I think it's so cool that my son has been an early advocate for that band. So he was listening to them, for the last maybe 2 years or 3 years,
Yeah.
like since he's been 16 or 17, it's like amazing. So that's a group that I have picked up on lately. But then the cool thing about when he was here is we were talking about bands that I haven't really thought too much about, but we talked a lot about Joy Division.
Yeah.
And we went and found some old videos of Joy Division, and we're just talking about them. And he freaking blew me out of the water with his knowledge and his respect and knowledge, and talked about how their songs were structured and what Ian Curtis, the singer, was going through, and what, why he got to the point where he committed suicide, unfortunately. And so we just talked, we had some great, really deep conversations. So where I'm going with that is go backwards sometimes too, even for stuff you might think like I'd kind of known Joy Division, but when they were getting big, I was getting, tattoos and spray painting walls and, all that stuff, and whatever, so I never really connected with Joy Division. Always thought they were pretty cool and liked them, but I didn't get to know them, frankly, very well. Just never was, in my world at that time. So here I was now in 2023 talking about Joy Division and realizing anew, or maybe even for the first time, truly, how awesome they really were. And that's cool too. So you can find stuff in life to be thrilled with that's, go back and listen to Chuck Berry and think about what he was doing on guitar in that era at that time. And particularly, given the cultural obstacles that he was facing, my God, I mean, holy shit, that guy was insanely great, or go back, I just watched that Elvis Presley movie that came out, a year or so ago, I guess. And I watched that with my son, same visit. And I was really impressed that they captured Elvis's friendship with BB King. And then that they went and Elvis saw Little Richard do his thing at a little, like a after hours nightclub type thing. And he was doing his thing, being Little Richard, which again, if you think about Little Richard, my goodness, holy cow, just every barrier you could break, he was breaking, with a sledgehammer. It was great. So that kind of thing. And then you go back and you get into the whatever it is, Joy Division or whatever, Little Richard, whoever, and you get into it and you discover it anew. And it's like seeing a new band. It's like, and it's super cool.
There's I haven't seen it, but there's a new Little Richard documentary.
Oh, okay.
I've heard it's really, really good. I've seen the trailer for it and it looks really good. I have not had a chance to see it yet, but
awesome. Yeah, I will have to check that out. Thanks for the tip.
Yeah, and speaking of documentaries, I've tried to find this quote, and I don't know if I'm making it up, but I feel like I heard this in the Wilco documentary from 25 years ago or whenever the documentary they made. The way that I remember it, and like I said, I haven't been able to go back and watch it, so I could have it wrong, but I feel like it was David Frick from Rolling Stone. And that whole Wilco thing about how like they made the record for Warner Brothers and they got dropped, and the label was basically like, if we put it out, you have to sell so many copies. It has to have a hit within the first 30 days. Otherwise you've lost it, right? Like no one's going to pay attention after that. And David Frick's whole thing was there's always a new kid picking up a Beatles record for the first time that it's brand new music to them. So Joy Division might be a band that they've been around for 40 years, 50 years, whatever, however long they've been around. But there's a kid today listening to Joy Division for the first time.
Yeah. And maybe this conversation will trigger some new ones, know? Yeah.
So I've always been intrigued by that we're very fortunate to live in a time when there's so much recorded history that we can always go back and discover something for the first time. I think that's kind of cool.
Yeah, no, I think so too. And interestingly, there's been a lot of really good, you talked about documentary, and there's been a lot of really good documentation of a lot of that stuff. I mean, there's, in hardcore even alone, there's Steve Blush's American Hardcore, and a number of other great books, out there, and dip documentary videos and things like that. The Descendants documentary is super good. And, there's a number, any number of others. The Boston documentary by Drew Stone, that's a great, he did an amazing job with that. So there's a lot of really good documentation done of the past. The DC documentary, there's been a couple of good books and movies about that. So, talking about that early Discord world and stuff like that. So there's some super cool stuff out there that, guys like, unfortunately, just because of technology, among other hurdles, but technology, what didn't exist is commonplace, back then. So, for a guy like Little Richard, there wasn't somebody, there weren't 35, people in the club filming every angle with their cell phones, or 100 or 50 or whatever, so, different world. And, technology was, in some ways, I kind of think that's kind of cool. I wonder, did those audiences have more of a connection with the music because they weren't able to just they weren't concentrating on holding it up and holding it above the person in front of them, and, all that kind of stuff, right there.
Yeah.
They were just in the moment, they were just in the now, right? Like you go to see early Elvis, early BB King, who else would just talk about Little Richard, Chuck Berry, whatever, and dang, what a spark that must have been.
Oh, for sure.
That's why, when you watched, even in the Elvis movie, when you watch the crowds, girls and, Beatles obviously experienced this a lot, but, girls literally screaming till they were hoarse, fainting, that's so awesome. That is awesome. Like, that means that they were so into it, that audience member, those hundreds of audience members, thousands, were so moved by that they screamed their voice out, that they fainted, that they cried. Like, that's the highlight of music to me, so I think, and I've had people tell me some really beautiful stories, not anywhere near to that scale, obviously, but, that made me cry, to where they heard a song of mine that made them feel, a certain way, or that they, the first date that they had with their girlfriend, or whatever, there's many, many wonderful stories, and I cherish each one of them. And, that's where music is. That's where it matters. That's where it matters. Yeah.
So I've just got a couple more. You said you were out walking your dog earlier.
Yes, sir.
Do your neighbors know who you are and what you like? Do your neighbors know about your history?
Generally, no. Most of them are, I mean, heck, I'm older now too, but, they just, I get the sense that they're, and I've never really liked it to so much be about me.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. I'd much rather be about the music and stuff like that. I've had a couple of good conversations with a couple of my neighbors about music, and, sort of, one guy's a super, 70s classic rock dude. And, so we talk about, all of that stuff, everybody from 70s Zeppelin to, to whatever, to Boston, to whatever, pick your 70s, rock band of choice. And we've had some cool conversations about that, but yeah, I kind of just, I like to, keep it on the quiet side, and just, I'll talk to you about music all night we'll have a great conversation, but I don't, I don't say, oh, well, I'm a musician and you should go buy my record, or let me give you one of my records. No, that's not my style.
Have any of your kids, friends, parents ever been like, hey, are you the guy? Do you happen to be the same guy that was in All?
Yes. Yeah.
That's happened to you before?
Yeah, definitely.
That's very cool.
And I have had people who've known me for a while and then say, wait a minute. Were you in Dag Nasty? I have Punk Rock Academy, in my brain, like, is that you? You never told me, you son of a, yeah. So we've had some of that. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. That's okay.
I don't know if you've done this before, but, and I don't know that it's necessarily a current trend, but, I don't know that it just started recently, but a lot of bands are doing the anniversary shows. Have you done any Down by Law anniversary shows where you play an album?
It's funny you should mention that, because I think there is an anniversary for Punk Rock Academy Fight Song, I think next year. Is that right? Yeah. And I think somebody's been talking about that, about doing something. And then I believe that, going back even further in time, the Brotherhood album turns a certain magical age, I think this year. And so there's some discussion either this year or next year, I can't remember, but there's some discussion about trying to do something special for that. So yeah, I don't mind that. And I know some people like hate playing their older stuff. I absolutely love it. Because if you loved it at the beginning, why wouldn't you love it now? Right?
Yeah.
Like, don't, just enjoy it and have fun and realize how much. The other thing too, when I put out a song or you put out a podcast or whatever into the world, or you write an article, whatever, that now belongs to the world. It's not yours anymore.
Yeah.
So Can I Say, that belongs to everybody who loves Can I Say. It's their album. And Punk Rock Academy Fight Song, that is their album.
Yeah.
Don't Sleep, our new album, is called Sea Change, SEE Change, just coming out. Like when that comes out, that's the audience's album. It's no longer anybody's but theirs. So every album you own, whoever you are in life, that's your album. It is there for you. It matters to you. It personally affects you, and that is great. So I don't care if it's as huge as Michael Jackson, right? But when I hear Billie Jean or Thriller or whatever, some huge multi-gazillion people listen, that's my song now.
Yeah.
And it's your song if you're listening to it too, right? It's cool. So like that's why music matters. So I have no problem going back to pay homage in a way to the fact that so many people made EYS theirs, or made Dag Nasty theirs, or made all theirs, or made, Down by Law theirs, or Don't Sleep, or Bandoleros, whatever, so I love it. And I hope that there's good opportunities to do that. I would love it.
This might be putting you on the spot a little bit, but since Dig Me Out is all about kind of talking about the overlooked, underappreciated albums from the 90s, is there any album that you would recommend that Tim and Jay listen to and review someday?
I would say the Doughboys from Montreal, Canada, were a phenomenal group, and I don't remember their exact years of existence.
I think I think they did do. They have an album called Crush.
Yeah, mm-hmm.
I think they might. I think they might have reviewed that one.
Oh, okay, great.
Yeah,
so I know
that's a
that we toured with them in All, so I know that it was in the late 80s, 88, where they were existing. But I'm pretty sure they lasted into the 90s.
Yeah.
So I would say that's definitely one. Trying to think of who else there was. And then, boy, you're right. You are kind of catching me unawares. But
I should have asked you that. But I should have asked you that at the beginning and let you think about it.
Yeah. So I would definitely say that that whole era of Epitaph bands, there was a lot of greatness in that. And some of those aren't quote unquote hidden gems, right? Like, I mean, it's hard to say any Bad Religion album is hidden, right? Because they're so very popular, and those albums were, some of those 90s albums were untouchable, the certainly, the early Rancid stuff, mind-boggling as well. And so I don't know if I actually am thinking of, I'm going to think of this in 5 minutes from now, I'm going to say, dang it, why didn't I remember X, Y, or Z? Yeah. But I would say just that whole movement of, like you mentioned, it was getting huge, but it was still almost raw enough to be a new thing. And it was getting huge sometimes, but it was not so huge that it wasn't special. And so a lot of those bands were just coming out at that time, I mean, I remember playing with Pennywise and just being like, oh, wow, these guys are really good, like really good. Oh my gosh, and like the tightness and the dedication to their music was one thing that I was like, and again, they're huge. So I'm not saying that's a hidden gem, but I'm saying like, maybe again, kind of like going backwards in time, go back and watch an early Pennywise video maybe, or something, a live video, or go back even further, in time and visit things new and fresh. And you'd be surprised how surprised you will be and how awesome something can be.
Yeah. Well, the internet, everybody knows how to use the internet these days. But is there any place you want, you said the Don't Sleep album's coming out pretty soon, right?
Yeah, so I think it's June 2nd
Okay.
comes out. Yeah.
Like I said, the internet, if people don't know how to search for that on their own right now, that's too bad because we're far enough along. But is there any place, anything you want people to check out? Do you have any social media stuff that you want people to follow? Like what would be a good way to kind of
Oh,
find out
thanks.
what you're
I don't
doing?
really do too much of that kind of stuff, actually. I would just say, definitely, I think in this year there'll be a new Down by Law album, and I think certainly on June 2nd, the Don't Sleep album will come out. And I got to tell you, you got to believe in what you do, right? Or hopefully. And if you don't, then don't do it. Like if I thought an album wasn't really, if I didn't love it, I would say, nah, guys, let's just hang on. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, and there've been some songs that I've done that I'm like, yeah, we missed it. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
it's like that, what was that album? They Can't All Be Zingers. Who was that by? Is that by Primus, I think? They
Oh,
Can't All Be
maybe.
Zingers. I think that was maybe the Primus Greatest Hits album, but which was a great title.
Yeah.
But you know, so yeah, you occasionally, even Hank Aaron or Babe Ruth struck out once in a while, but overall, Hank Aaron and Babe Ruth, were fantastic, baseball players. So I think I try to get at least a single every time, if not a double, if not a triple, if not a home run, and so I'm really stoked about the new Don't Sleep album. This is a band of guys, like I said, who formed based around our love of where we all came up with our roots. And it shows, and it's like, and the drummer, phenomenal, the guitar player, phenomenal. Everybody's fully committed, and
Yeah.
you hear it in the songs. So it's very distinctive, and it has its own sound, and it's based in the roots that we share, but it's got its own thing, which is, I'm very stoked about that.
Very cool. I'm anxious to hear it. So I'll
Thanks. We'll
definitely
make
be
sure we
listening to it.
get one to you. Yeah, for
Awesome.
sure. Do you want a vinyl copy? Because we'll get one. You get a vinyl copy if you like.
That would be
Or do you
fantastic.
prefer vinyl, or do you want CD or
No,
audio or digital or whatever?
No, honestly, because of I bought a record. I mean, I had a record player when I was a kid, and of course, like then I went to CDs, and then the iPod came out, and I thought, why do I ever need to own something physical again? I can own every song in my
I
hand.
know it, brother. I know it.
And then
Yeah.
about 10 years ago, I was at a garage sale, and I got a turntable for $30, and I don't know if I can do this. We'll see. So, so that's my vinyl.
Oh yeah. Oh, that does not look like a brand new record collection. That looks like you got some quantity there.
Yeah.
Wow.
So yeah, so I've gotten way back into it.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah. And I will say, from a pure, after doing this for so long, I can tell you that analog recording does blow away digital. There's just no question. It's not just like being hip or indie to say that. It is actually really true. Analog
Yeah.
beats digital hands down. There's a warmth to it. And the physical experience of holding vinyl and putting it on and pushing play or lifting the needle and putting, there's nothing like that. You have now become invested with the music in a way that just hitting it on your phone or your iPod or whatever,
I loved, don't get me wrong, I love digital. I love being able to listen to anything,
Sure.
whenever, wherever, however, but it's so easy to go to the next song. Oh, wait, let me try something else. With the vinyl, like you're putting it on and you're committed to it. And that's what I love about it is I have to be committed to it. And I tend to enjoy it a lot more because I put the time into it instead of skipping around. So.
Yeah, so I have a very, very small story, and I know we've been talking way too
Yeah.
long, so I apologize
No.
to you and to anybody who suffered through this whole thing. But I will tell you that vinyl, like you said, at that time was kind of, in that 90s period started to go down, right? It was going down, and CDs were the thing. And there was a discussion at Epitaph about how do we continue doing vinyl, which I'm sure every indie and major label was having the same discussions at that time. And again, because everybody was saying, no, I don't want vinyl anymore, and I want a CD at that time was the thing. So I'm fairly proud of, one thing in my life, hopefully more than one, but there's one that I can think of in this conversation that I did right, which was I said, not only do I really beg you, please don't stop making vinyl, to Brad and everybody, but I said, I am begging you for permission to put out a double album for All Scratched Up. And so that's the album that came out after Punk Rock Academy Fight Song.
Yeah.
Well, luckily, Punk Rock Academy Fight Song had done so well that, you know, they're like, all right, you're a pain in the ass, you know, like, okay, you know, so they did, and we recorded. And if you have the vinyl of All Scratched Up, it's a double vinyl. That was so against the trend at that time, and it's you know, quote unquote against the grain, right? Again, like Bad Religion. So we went against the grain, and I'm very proud of that album from tip to bottom, you know, and you know, so we showed our love of of vinyl even in the mid 90s. So
That's awesome.
yeah, I'd like to think I made my tiny little contribution to keeping vinyl alive.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, this has been an absolute pleasure. I really
Thank you.
appreciate your I mean, you seem like such a positive guy. Not that the bands I talk to aren't positive, but people have gone through those waves, right? Where maybe they've gone through some really tough times, but it seems like your outlook has just been phenomenal. And so I appreciate
you.
I appreciate you sharing.
Thank you. And I think, you know, first of all, thank you for having me, and thanks for the great conversation. Really have enjoyed it. But to your point, I think it's very easy in life for all of us, and me notwithstanding, everybody, to have moments where you're hit hard with various things, illness, financial, career, relationship, music, art, whatever you do and it will hit a lull. You will get sick. You will, have at one point in your life, unless you're extraordinarily lucky, you will break up with someone you thought that you were going to be with for the rest of your life, etc. And I hope that all of us are past those points now, but at some point we've all had our heart broken. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
And the anguish of that is awful. But I will say that I am happy to be seen as a guy who's also been there with you on that journey, brothers and sisters. I truly have been. Frank Sinatra regrets I've had a few, but then again, too few to mention. I don't even know about that part for me, but I definitely, we all have regrets, but the trick is, if there is a trick, is to know that those bad times form you and shape you in ways you can't even imagine at the time. And that there are doors opening, like I said earlier, there are doors opening from all these things that happen to you sometimes that you wouldn't have expected, and that shape you in new ways that you might never have expected and you might never have done had you not gone through the rough time. So I'm not being, blindly Pollyanna-ish or optimistic about it, but I am going to say that I'm here for you, and I hope that my music is reminds you that life can be extraordinary as well as extraordinarily hard, and even when it's extraordinarily hard, we can get through it together, and music will be one of your best ways to do that.
Amen.
Awesome.
Yep. I think that's a great way to wrap this up. So thank you for taking the time, and all the listeners can check you out at Don't Sleep, and then can go back and listen to all the Down by Law stuff and be on the lookout for a new Down by Law album.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it, Chip. Thanks so much.
Thanks for listening. To support the podcast, visit www.patreon.com/digmeout and become a monthly subscriber at www.digmeoutpodcast.com, where you can find links to our Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram pages.